Well, hello, everybody. Surprise, surprise. Look at this. Good afternoon. I thank you so much for joining me. This is Miss B, Positively Miss B, coming to you live with limited resource awareness with my special guest, Angela Brown. In case you didn't know, she's the CEO of YESHUA'S House. Hello, welcome, Angela.
Hello, good to be here, Miss B. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. In case you are not aware that we have a podcast and a group dedicated to limited resource awareness. We do. Miss Angela Brown comes on once a month to talk about different, I guess you could say, situations that may concern those who have limited resources. She also has been sharing things about Yeshua's house. Um, Limited resources is focused on offering encouragement and support to individuals who may be experiencing limited resources to simply provide adequately for themselves or their families. And we also want to increase that awareness to others. Now, what we want to do on today's podcast is allow Miss Angela Brown to tell a little bit about herself and Yeshua's house. And then she wants to also talk about homelessness. Um, and well, I'm just going to let her tell you what she's going to talk about. But right now, Miss Angela, tell the people a little bit about Yeshua's house.
Okay, well, Yeshua's house is a transitional home. Excuse me. Is a transitional home for women and children who have either been abused or are in financial transition. And many times we know those two things come together. So we have had, I think it was 49 women and 32 children come through the home since 2013 when it opened. And we developed a program from the beginning, knowing that there are specific needs that women have. One is that you do not need to be socially isolated when you are going through a separation from a loved one, even if that loved one has been abusive. So the social isolation piece is something that can hinder. I mean, if they just went straight to an apartment or straight to a whatever, or even into a home where they couldn't talk about their situation because of the family connections or whatever. But so by providing a home where 3 women and their children are able to stay, these women have something in common and they can support each other. So we have a support group, we have a financial management class, and a counselor. So by providing those things, we hope that in 18 months, which is the duration of how long a woman can stay, within that 18 months, we pray that she'll be able to leave with the support that she needs, the foundation that she needs to be independent.
Where are you located?
We have 2 locations in Petersburg. They're both homes. There's no signage. They're close to bus stops, 2 blocks each from a bus stop. And they are just in a lovely, lovely neighborhoods they're like everybody else in the neighborhood. So kids get on the bus on the corner and nobody knows anything.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I have to ask, how has the quarantine or the pandemic impacted Yeshua's house and the residents there?
Yes. Well, in March, 2 of our ladies were furloughed from their jobs. So they're grateful to have a job to go back to, but of course that immediately impacted their income. A third lady is retired, she's on disability, so it didn't affect her. And then we have 2 ladies who are working very restricted hours at their fast food places that they work at. So it's affected 4 out of 5 of our ladies. Fortunately, one of our ladies, her employer is paying everybody on that job 40 hours per week in spite of not working.
What a blessing.
So she's very grateful for that. She knows that is orchestrated from the Lord, and she's enjoying some downtime.
Absolutely. Now, for yourself, Yeshua's House, are you in need of extra donations at this time? Are you in need of anything special?
Yes, yes, we have. We put out to our donors that anything that they donate this month or until the virus is gone will go toward the women's fees. Our women's stay, a single woman pays $475 per month. So that helps support them in getting their fee in and help support us because that's our bottom line is what our women bring in, and that really doesn't pay for everything. But a single woman pays 475, and a woman with a child pays 525, and we have 3 women, each with a child. So whatever donations come in from now on, they will go to relieve the women of the burden of that. And of course, we're not putting anybody out. We're going to go through this together.
Absolutely. How can they make those donations?
Um, well, we love Cash App. Cash App is for us the $ and Yeshua's House. That's YESHUAS House, HOUSE. YESHUASHOUSE. So
Absolutely.
that's our favorite. And then PayPal is available on our website, which is yeshuashouse.net.
Also, there's another way that they can help you out. You have a book that 100% of the purchase price goes to Yeshua's House if they get it directly from you. Tell the listeners and viewers about that.
Okay, I wish I'd brought it in, but it's Mary tells her story, and it's my mother's story because she is the inspiration for Yeshua's House. She was orphaned at 6 because her father killed her pregnant mother and left 5 children, basically orphaned. So we recorded her memories. My sister actually recorded her memories of her childhood and the early years of marriage and stuff before she passed at 93.
Mm,
And I think you'll find it quite enjoyable. Quite enjoyable
absolutely.
because she did have a sense of humor. She was an overcomer, and that's one of the reasons, among many, that we wanted to publish it. And the board took on the cost of publishing it. So we believe she can be an inspiration to our women.
And again, how can they get the book?
Oh, the same way. uh, or you can send it to my email. Yeah, do the email, which is Yeshua's House Yeshua's House digit 2 refuge refuge at gmail.com.
Absolutely.
Just say that you want the book and send me, and I will send to you.
All
It
right.
is $12, and yes, we're pleased that all of that goes toward the funding of Yeshua's House.
I love that. You have a special message that you want to talk about today. Let's
Yeah.
get right to that.
Yes. Well, last month you were talking about how you don't like the term homeless because wherever a woman or wherever a person is, even if they set up in a little illegal area, that's their home. And I had never used the word homeless to refer to the women that we have, but somehow because that word kept getting tossed around, I told you that we do homeless women, right? Well, our women, when they come to us, they would be homeless if they didn't. Usually they come directly from a situation, directly from somebody that's given them a space for a period of time and they need to leave. But homelessness is a problem that has been growing, and it's growing. What caught my attention was I saw something on the news about how Europe is handling it, and Finland is right in the forefront. And Finland is trying to erase homelessness, and that's I want to talk to you about how they're doing it and how the U.S. is doing it. Okay, because they do kind of dovetail. This seems to be the new thing. So the problem isn't just, people don't have a home. The problem is housing costs. That's one of the bottom lines is housing costs.
Absolutely.
Because if you're paying more than 30% of your monthly income toward housing, then you probably don't have enough to, we're talking about people on the lower income strata, probably don't have enough to handle your other physical needs. And when housing is scarce, which it is very much so in Europe, but when housing is scarce, then rents go up, which makes the, kind of prices the lowest income people out of the market. So that's one reason. And another reason is, as our cities, which we had white flight at one point into the suburbs, and now white flight is coming back into the cities, and they want nice housing. So housing that was serving for the lowest income, and I guess I should tell you too that the statistics from the National Academy of Science say that 43 as of 2018, 43% of U.S. homeless population was African American, and 22% was Hispanic and Latino. So when I'm talking about the city problem, I'm talking about current residents in these cities, and we've seen it in Petersburg. I know you've seen it in Richmond, that housing is being bought up and it's being upgraded because people coming in want a quote better neighborhood, and where did the people go who could afford what housing was there? So that's how the scarcity of housing. It's not that we don't have the land in the U.S., which is Europe's problem, but we don't have the commitment to stable, affordable housing that we would like to have. So let me just talk about some reasons for homelessness. We know that there is what they call chronic homelessness, and that is a minority of the homeless. People who have determined that, no, I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do that because I want to be totally independent. And often that is a problem with mental illness. But aside from that percentage, you have sudden job loss and a family breakdown, whether that's domestic violence or severe substance abuse or mental health problems within the family, physical, sexual, emotional abuse. We have young people running away from home because of abuse in the home. And so the number of people between 14 and 22 that are homeless is growing. So the chronically homeless and those who are homeless like 3 times within 4 years are called the chronically homeless by the U.S. Okay, that's kind of our definition. If you're consistently homeless and choose to be, and if you are like, you get housing and then you lose it, you get housing and then you lose it, you get housing and then you lose it 3 times in 4 years. So the concept of housing first started, as far as I could see, in 2007 with Finland. And how Finland approached the problem was, they said, we feel like housing is a right. So we're not going to ask people to, well, first you need to clean up your drug use or your alcohol abuse, or you have to keep going to see your doctor to make sure that you're taking your meds and what. We're not going to put any strings on this. You need housing. You deserve housing. So it's called housing first. And what Finland did was they said, okay, we have a scarcity of housing. We have high rental costs. We're going to establish housing first as a national policy. and the state will pay for this. Volunteers will be a part of it. Municipalities will pay a portion, and the non-government organizations will pay a portion. So they bought up hotels in what they call hostels in Europe. We would call them an inn or something. And they bought up a former Salvation Army shelter that had 220 beds, made 80 apartments out of it. And they stopped having emergency shelters.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know, what kind of gap that put in it, but they said, we're going to put all our funds into permanent housing. And so, some people were able to be, they had stability in other ways, so they got into an apartment. And others needed to support services, and they would buy up like a housing block or an entire apartment complex or a motel and make that around the clock support service housing place. Okay. You have any questions? Because I've been rattling here.
No, you see, my expression is like, wow. I mean, keep going.
Well, I mean, if you're like me, you're looking at all the motels that are dilapidated.
Yes.
And the hotel, I mean, somebody else will try to buy the hotel and fix it up, and the same thing happens, and they get rid of it, and or it goes into decay, and then you've got substandard housing again. And of course, motels charge tremendous amounts of money. I mean, you pay $200 for a week. Mm-hmm. Who can pay $800 for their house?
Exactly.
And I mean, so these people who are staying there every week, they've got the stress of $200 or I'm out, $200 or I'm out. That's toxic stress.
Mm-hmm.
So in Finland, they said, okay, you're going to have a normal lease, meaning, what every resident has to do to have a lease, that's what you have to do. And they paid on a scale according to their income. And then once they were in the apartments or the things, then they talked to them about, okay, so you have I'll say an alcohol problem. So, that in the past, that has kept you from a consistent job. So are you willing for us to address that now with the services that we have, so that you can keep this home and you won't be losing it for lack of income. And so what they have found is that crime has decreased, that they're spending less on social programs. In the social programs, I mean, that's interesting, all the things that homelessness impacts, because most people who are homeless will go to an emergency shelter when they're sick. And there are not a lot of, like every 30 days, a person might be, I'm talking about chronically homeless basically now, a chronically homeless person might show up in the emergency room every 30 days because the diabetes is out of control, or the high blood pressure, or whatever. Okay. Skin conditions, mental disorders, anything could cause that. So besides the hospital costs going down in Finland, so did children going into foster care. And then the days spent in family shelters, because the government was supporting those too. So they figured they were spending $67,000. Excuse me, this is a U.S. statistic, that a cost per family in permanent supportive housing was $67,000 over a 2-year period. But we would have been spending $46,000 for family shelters and $18,000 for foster care during that time, and that didn't include the hospitalization costs, psychiatric centers, and jails and prisons. So oh, and then, the other connection with homelessness, and I keep talking about drugs and alcohol, but I'm not doing that because I'm trying to stereotype. But what the situation is, if you don't have anything to do, you attach yourself to a substance to relieve your boredom, to just find something to do, and then it becomes an addiction. So there's a tremendous link. Okay. So what is the United States doing? Well,
that's what I'm waiting for.
There you go.
You said that they dovetail. Now, I'm impressed with everything you said. So,
right. Well, because Finland is in the forefront, and it's like who people are looking to, even other European Union states are looking to it because they have decreased their costs by going to housing first. And of course, they've decreased their homeless population. But so the United States put in housing first policies also. And of course, HUD is responsible for that. The housing, what does the UD stand for? I'm not sure right now. Housing and development. Okay. So they determined too, it's more cost effective. And of course, it's humane. We're doing the right thing to provide housing. And so they too are through Section 8, which it's got another name to it too. But we normally refer to it as Section 8. Through Section 8, 90% of United States families that would have been homeless are in housing because of Section 8 and such. But it's two-pronged in the United States. They say, okay, you either fall under permanent supportive housing, which is tied to voluntary support services. So that's like Finland too. You don't have to buy into case management or life skill building or mental health treatment or addiction counseling. You don't have to. It's permanent supportive housing, and that's for the chronically homeless. And those were the figures I was talking to you about, is that cost per family is really, it's a savings to the nation and the state that they're in because of the expenses we would have to try to keep them to manage their homeless state. Okay. Then the second part is rapid rehousing. And rapid rehousing is for those who are not chronically homeless. And that's 7 out of 10 people. 7 out of 10 are there because they lost their job or an illness, or, I know we've had people who were living with mom and dad, and then mom or dad passed, or stepmother took over the home when dad passed and you're out. So all sorts of things can cause a person to be homeless temporarily. And so rapid rehousing provides short-term rental assistance and services. So the average support is 6 months. So after 6 months, you need to be able to handle the cost of your, I'll say, Section 8 housing by yourself. And that's where we get a cycle of, oh, I can't do that, and now I'm homeless again. So, people can become chronically homeless even after going into rapid rehousing, but they weren't chronically homeless necessarily when they came in. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So the problem with homeless shelters is that there is an increased risk of developing health problems when you're in one. And this is not me. This is the National Academy of Sciences, the 2018 report on homelessness. Skin conditions, trauma, often from physical assault or rape, and they've even had outbreaks of tuberculosis in shelters. And that's contagious. So, and then the other problem with shelters is that women particularly are marginalized, or maybe that's not the word. They have particular concerns. And of course, one of them is that they are vulnerable to prostitution, to sexual favors, to abuse. High rate of unintended pregnancies. And then their babies are born more often with a low birth weight, which leads to the next generation having the concerns of the former generation, right? And then the other one, the daily problem, is hygiene needs for women are greater, and it's an added stress. So, and then homeless people are more likely to have asthma and high blood pressure and diabetes, and more likely to smoke and use alcohol and use drugs. Opioids are the new drug of choice, right? So the problem with children being in a homeless situation is that they have opportunity, using that word a little differently, but they're more in danger of having adverse childhood experiences. Have you heard of the ACEs? Okay. Well, ACEs is something that the social workers came up with. Said, how many of these can you check off? My mother was an alcoholic, or I've experienced homelessness, or I experienced abuse or sexual assault at an early age. However many you can check off, that increases your chance to have a chronic medical condition, because we're holistic, right? Mind, body, soul. All of that works together to determine our health and our welfare.
Exactly.
So, not that these adverse experiences don't affect adults too, but when they affect you when you're young, your whole life can be
altered.
You don't know how to live a normal life. Perhaps you can't trust people like someone who's been in a healthy environment.
Exactly. But then what is a healthy environment? We can talk about that another time.
Yeah, right. Okay. So transitional homes are no longer, now they used to be something you heard a little bit more about, but you don't hear much about them anymore because HUD has gone to the rapid rehousing for those who are not chronically homeless, and to the, what I call it, the permanent supportive housing for people who are chronically homeless. And so that left, okay, we don't need transitional housing because that's 18 months, 24 months, 12 months, whatever it is. We want people permanently in a place. And so that has impacted YESHUA'S House ability to receive funds. Right. So our women cannot, we're not Section 8, so they can't have a portion of their rent paid through the government. When they are finished in 18 months, if they're still not able to make a $750 payment on a one-room apartment, just kind of going by what seems to be current in Petersburg, then they have the added stress of, okay, now am I going to be homeless again? Because they say, well, you're not homeless if you're in a transitional home. So until YESHUA'S House puts you on the street, you are not classified as homeless.
My.
Now, you are classified as homeless for purposes of the point in time count, so that Petersburg gets money, or any other locality gets money, because they know you're not in permanent housing, but they're not giving money to those in transitional homes, and they're not going to consider that when they transition out to another home, to their hopefully permanent home. So that's the catch-22 with transitional housing. Before we came into the ministry of transitional home, we learned from people who had transitional homes, and they were very helpful to us. Neither of those are still working. Neither of those are both of those were in Richmond, but neither of those are still around. And we're around because of individual donors and organizations that see the need and want to have that need met.
Forgive me. I don't like no, because I should have been writing these questions down. We're going to have a part two of this. Absolutely. But
It's a lot. It's a lot. You can see that. You can see how much I've learned just from dabbling on the surface of the statistics available.
and those statistics were from 2018, so it's no telling what has transpired since then. But one of the things
Oh, yeah,
that really got my attention emotionally was because I can really understand why some people say, I don't want to go into a shelter because of the very things that you mentioned. It's not always safe. Uh, the health conditions, of course, they talked about bed bugs. They talked about people being raped and robbed. And they talked about, some of the staff members not having integrity and how they were treated. And sometimes the owners themselves were more interested in collecting the funds from the government than providing for the residents there. They didn't have toilet paper, adequate toiletries. There's a lot. Most people say, why don't you just go to a shelter? And sometimes, the individuals themselves said, I feel safer among my peers on the street. So there's a lot of things that we can talk about. But the takeaway from everything would be never stop seeking help. It may not
right.
always be ideal. It may not always be available. You talked about how, and so from both of us being in Petersburg, we looked at the Ramada Inn situation and a lot of other situations that, there are people of financial means that could possibly had taken those properties and turned them into something that a nonprofit could, help the less fortunate with. There's a lot of opportunities out there for people to do something with these vacant properties. Um, and so you also pointed out that I like to use the word limited resources instead of
Hmm.
homelessness. But in reality, you explain the transitions from one stage to the other, why people become in that situation. As a mental health nurse, I worked at Community Services Board and in different other areas. And there are a lot of reasons why people are not in the ideal living situation. And a lot of it has to do with family dynamics, loss of income, and substance abuse, as well as, to be honest with you, especially when Central State and the training schools started letting people out,
Yeah.
a lot of the homes that originally were there, they have to gone out of business and or not providing adequate placement, and you have a lot of people on the street who normally were taken care of institutionally. So there's a lot of things at play in why people are not again living in an ideal situation. And the reason why I wanted to um, bring you on, and we agreed to have you on at least once a month, is because people are so quick to assume, and especially those who are thrown into the situation and have nowhere to go, no idea where to get started, red tape, and then fear. And someone as yourself can help educate them on the opportunities that are out there and to help them, even if it's to transition. But we need to make people aware that there's a need for awareness. I know what I said as a play on words. Because there's so many people say, let's bring an end to let's bring an end to, well, people were so-called homeless since the beginning of time. There's always been some type of reason why people were kicked out of a village, were kicked out of,
Mm.
a certain area, and they had nowhere to go. There's a lot of reasons why people are in less than ideal living situations. So I didn't interrupt you because I was gleaning. I want to get more involved in, the limited resource awareness movement that I am starting on Storm Talk 365. Before we go, Angela, um, we all, they have some memes and talked about being shut up with people you don't like. But in reality, I've noticed an uptick in the reporting of, I'm not saying that it's not already been out there, but the reporting of domestic violence in the news. Most recent, a school teacher from a private
Yeah.
school, the domestic violence, because the time that you normally don't spend together, you have more of it together. The tensions are heightened because not only is there already relationship issues, but you have financial issues. You have the what ifs, the how comes, and then you have the mental health issues that are escalated because the doctor's appointments are canceled and the medicine is running out, and then the paranoia sits in, and then the loneliness because you don't have that socialization that normally kept you grounded. So, my question to you before we leave, um, and it's hard to say what advice, but what words of encouragement could you give not only women, but people who are in a situation that the quarantine has heightened their anxiety?
Well, I'm looking at the quarantine as a time for all of us to get connected with the only source of our health, of our stability, of our income, of our, one of my favorite verses is tied to the iris. Um, Jesus said on the Sermon of the Mount, consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. But even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed as one of these. And before that, he talked about food and other things, but that was the clothing piece. And he ended up with, so don't worry. Just don't worry, because your Father knows you have need of all these things. Seek first the kingdom of God and righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So, regardless of the circumstances that we're in, God is present. He is present. And when we feel like he's not, it's not because he's not there. It's because we don't have access to his instructions, or we haven't made access. We haven't given ourselves access to his instructions.
Mm.
So, when women come into our home, and everything we do is, whether it's financial class or the counseling or the or support group, it's scripture based. It's not um, denominational, but it's based on healthy relationships as God outlines them in scripture. And when you begin to see everything good that comes to you from God and everything negative as an opportunity for God to work, then your sights are lifted and your spirits are lifted, and you begin to see that you have options that you couldn't see before, because you have a protector, you have a shepherd, you have a defender, you have a savior, you have everything you need in him. And I mean, one after another, a woman comes in, and the first thing that happens is, she just lost her job before she came in, and she gets a new one when she arrives, and then the coronavirus comes, and this employer pays you 40 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
This is, and we see this all the time, because God is so concerned that you be in a healthy situation that when you take a step toward a healthy situation, he begins to just pour things out on you.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one thing I would say. The other thing is that people during this virus have been showing themselves as generous in spirit.
Mm.
And so, the donations to food banks and the opportunities to get items that are necessary, whether it's medicines or whatever. These things are in the news, and whatever your needs are, I believe that they can be met if you follow up, or you know maybe some of us, we need to swallow our pride if we haven't been in that situation before. Swallow our pride and say, I need a ride to the food bank, or can you help me until this is over with money for this medication that I need or somebody else needs. We're going to have to rely on each other and know that people are God's resources too.
Mm.
I've been encouraged by a lot of what I see good people doing at a time like this. But I do believe that God has told the world is too much with you. You have many gods, whether it's your bank account uh, or your what's it called, your family or your job, your status. You have many gods. I'm going to strip them all, and you come face to face with your only reliable resource, God Himself.
Mm. Mm. Well, I asked you and you gave it to me. Listen, we fixing to have some church up in here. In case you didn't know, neither one of us makes any hesitation to let you all know that we have a personal relationship with Christ, and we seek ye first the kingdom of God and all of his righteousness. And then all those things are added to us. So we encourage you to find your strength through your faith, and that your faith be your currency. Um, Wendy Lee said, look at everything as an opportunity for negativity and then see how God works. So what we're saying is that in spite of how the situation may appear, um, they say trouble don't last always, but you have the power and authority, not only through your faith, but you have to get up and do something. You just can't sit around, poor me, this is, and then absorb all the negativity, and then what you think you attract. So um, Angela, I have really learned a lot, especially how you said, we dovetail other countries and trying to, um, I'm not going to say eliminate, but trying to work through the issues of adequate housing, and how we can provide it for others. So that being said, everybody, Angela Brown, the CEO of Yeshua's House in Petersburg, has a podcast that comes on once a month, and we're going to see how this once a month video goes. But please go to her page. You have a fan page, Yeshua's House. Is that correct, Angela?
Well, yeah, Yeshua's House has Facebook page.
Facebook page, the Yeshua's House
Hmm.
Facebook page, and see how you can benefit from learning more about the services that she offers, and maybe do in-kind donations to help offset the fees that they are incurring because of the loss of income from those who are requiring their services. So, again, I thank you, Angela, for coming. We did this spontaneously, it was not planned, but I'm glad we did it, and we have the opportunity to share the information about how to become more secure in your housing needs. Angela, again, I thank you so much for. I mean, I want to keep talking because I have so many questions. So we're going to have to do a part two about this.
Right.
That being
We
said,
need.
if you have any questions, post it below the video, or go to Angela on the Yeshua's House page, Facebook page, and ask more about how you can become involved in helping those with limited resources, especially those residents at Yeshua's House. All right, everybody, stay blessed, stay healthy, make wise choices for yourself, and let your faith guide you. Okay. All right, Angela. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Not a problem. Bye bye.
Bye bye.